on this Thursday, the was it 22nd, 23rd, 22nd, something like that of um, October 2025. It's 23rd, right? I honestly forget the number of the date exactly. Whatever. Um, but what is happening here in Israel with the situation of the Trump ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas in Gaza? Well, you may know that since the ceasefire went into effect about a couple weeks ago now, pretty much, the ceasefire has been broken a number of times by Hamas. People in Gaza have intentionally, very often, crossed over the yellow line, which is the line of control currently that Israel controls up to. It's about half of Gaza. Um, Unfortunately, even innocent people have crossed across the line, and they did not heed the warnings of the IDF. Multiple times, people were warned, turn back, turn back, turn back. And Israel shot at a van full of people, which was quite unfortunate and really tragic, honestly. Uh, a family was killed because they didn't respect the yellow line. They crossed over it, and despite multiple warnings, they all died because they were shot at after crossing the line and going too far. Now, the IDF has marked that yellow line very clearly, in addition to the audible warnings that they have given out before, as well as the maps that they distributed electronically and with leaflets and posted in many places. Now there are literally barriers every 200 meters along the entire line so that people will know exactly, and visually they can see it, which hopefully will reduce or even eliminate any accidental crossings over that line. It's something that should, I really hope, help reduce those accidental deaths to zero, frankly, is what it would be the goal. The IDF does not want to shoot at people. It's just that, people sometimes don't pay attention to the rules, and there's an army sign saying don't cross this line, and they ignore it, which is extremely unfortunate. Hamas has been killing people in their opposition, people opposed to them in Gaza, because they don't want there to be any force that they can hand their weapons to and that they can give power to. They obviously want to continue to stay in power, despite the fact that they signed the deal that says they will hand over power to an international force. They say they won't do that. They have flatly, officially rejected it. A few days ago, they said they will not turn over their weapons, they will not give up power, and they will not leave the political scene. So maybe they want to have a technocrat Hamas person in the future of Gaza's political scene. I think that's unacceptable. Hamas must be completely dismantled certainly as a terrorist force. You want to call them a military force, you go right ahead. To me, they're terrorists. They're not military. They have military style and military grade weapons, military style kind of tactics in some way, but not really, because they don't fight in that way. And they don't fight in uniform. They fight in civilian clothes. The only day they actually did any fighting in uniform was some of them, not all of them, but some of them were wearing Hamas uniforms on October 7th. But other than that, they wear civilian clothes. So that way you can't tell who's a civilian and who's not, who's a non-combatant and who's a combatant. And still right now, the ceasefire is basically hanging on by a thread. And you have Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and J.D. Vance in Israel all attempting to, foster more acceptance by the Hamas to continue the ceasefire. One of the problems is that Hamas has now directly negotiated with Steve Witkoff. I say it's a problem because it's the old thing of you shouldn't negotiate with terrorists. But of course, Israel does negotiate with terrorists, as does the United States, despite many decades of claiming that they don't. They obviously do. This is a problem because once you do that, you guarantee that they will do the same things over and over again, as has been demonstrated for decades. Right? Once they see that you're willing to negotiate with them, they view their actions as more legitimate, and they're going to be incentivized to do it again, which is exactly what's happened. So, anyway, Witkoff and Jared Kushner are here to see the implementation of the ceasefire go to the next stage, which includes troops from other countries having arrived here and resources from other countries having arrived here to help implement the ceasefire and beginning to remove some rubble or clear out some rubble in Gaza. But the troops from these international countries, they're not going into Gaza, right? They're actually stationed in Kiryat Gat, which is a city in Israel, not far from Gaza. And they are basically monitoring the ceasefire deal, right? They brought equipment, they brought monitoring equipment, what have you. It includes people from the UAE, from Jordan, from Turkey, from some other countries. And they're here to keep an eye, and American troops here are also monitoring through CENTCOM. They've established a little unit here of a couple of hundred troops that are monitoring the ceasefire deal as well. And American CENTCOM troops, in fact, warned of an imminent attack by Hamas. This was about 4 or 5 days ago. They said there's going to be an imminent attack by Hamas in violation of the deal. And lo and behold, that same day, pretty much, or the next day, a number of people from that organization, Hamas, attacked Israel, and Israel responded after the Hamas killed 2 Israeli soldiers with RPGs and I think grenades or machine guns. They killed a couple of Israeli soldiers. The Israelis responded, killed dozens of Hamas terrorists that were involved in that whole thing. And that was, a violation by Hamas of the ceasefire deal. But exactly as I told you would happen, the United States and other countries are pressing Israel to stick to the ceasefire and not to respond to minor violations, which is, could I have written the script for it? Yeah, I could have, because I literally told you that's what's going to happen. Is Hamas testing the will of the US and Israel and other signatories of the deal? 100%, that's exactly what I told you. And are they testing to see the limits that they can go to before other signatories of the deal will back out from the deal and say, Israel is responding to the ceasefire violations too harshly, and we don't support this anymore. That's exactly what Hamas is hoping for. Hamas is hoping that the deal will fall through because of their continued terrorist actions. Even Turkey, which is ostensibly an ally of Israel, despite the many years of disgusting things that the president of Turkey has said, Prime Minister Erdogan, or president or whatever Erdogan has said of Israel, and he has been, calling for insane things against Israel. Meanwhile, Israel and Turkey maintain very strong economic ties and even military ties. And Turkey, of course, is a member of NATO. So it matters that, that they continue to maintain ties with Israel because it shows that the political noise that their president is making is just politics, right? It's not actually a situation that Turkey is actually an enemy of Israel, right? It's actually the opposite. It's just that for political reasons, to appeal to his base, which are Islamists in Turkey, of which he is one. He continues to attack Israel verbally on the political scene, etc. And that is a problem because Turkey, again, is a member of NATO, and they host American air base and troops and nuclear weapons. That's why they're a member of NATO, by the way, if you don't know your history. Right? The Turkish air base, or the Turkish government in the 1960s or so agreed to host American nuclear weapons as a defense against the Soviet Union back when their nuclear weapons posed a significant threat to world peace during the Cold War. So America said, well, no, we're going to have, weapons in Turkey to make sure the Soviet Union doesn't try anything stupid. Now, of course, we have a very different government in Turkey that many people say, Turkey shouldn't be even a member of NATO, but that's for another video. Personally, I think they actually should remain in NATO because it's good for the world that they're in NATO. It's far better that they're in NATO than if they were to be kicked out and then would obviously join forces with Russia, and then that would be a very bad situation overall. So, yeah, it's problematic, but it's for another video because it's a very big topic in and of itself. But right now, the situation in Israel between the Hamas and Israel is that the ceasefire remains in place. Right? It's back on after a number of violations back and forth. Like, Israel hasn't violated it, but the tit for tat fighting that I told you was going to happen happened, and the violations that the Hamas has done have been met with the kind of response one would expect from Israel. And now we are seeing a situation where Israel is expected to continue to uphold the ceasefire. And the U.S., led by Trump, obviously, is basically telling Israel, don't respond in kind for every violation. Try to keep your responses minimized. And that's exactly what I told you would happen as well. And Trump himself, by the way, this is for all you conspiracy theorists who say the Jews control everything, and the Jews control America and Israel controls America. Trump himself has said multiple times in the last week alone that, if he wanted to, he could, have Israel re-enter Gaza in 2 minutes. You could just tell Israel, go do this, and they would do that. In other words, he's ordering Israel what to do. So if you think Israel is controlling America, think again. It's very much the other way around, that Israel is influenced disproportionately by the United States. I mean, which is fine because Israel is a strong ally of the United States, and the United States and Israel have many shared interests here. And obviously Israel is a tiny little country compared to the United States, and we are very much, dependent in some ways on, or it's very important to us to maintain that relationship. And it's not because of the money. If you think it's money, it's not. Right? Israel has plenty of money in its economy compared to the few $1 billion a year that the United States discounts on the price of arms that it sells Israel. Right? Israel doesn't actually receive money as any kind of grant or gift from the United States. What it receives is a discount on the shopping list of arms that they buy from the United States on a certain amount of up to a few $1 billion. Like 80% of the money the U.S. allocates to Israel isn't actually money that the U.S. gives to Israel. It's money that it's just a discount on the price for arms. Again, 80% of that allocation at foreign aid has to be spent on American arms, which creates American jobs or pays for American jobs in defense contractors, etc., defense companies. The remaining 20% of that money that Israel is sort of allocated by the Congress isn't given to Israel for it to keep. It's given to Israel to purchase equipment, including offensive arms from places like Russia and China, and has to spend all that money on that. Yeah, has to spend all that remaining 20% of money on arms from countries where the United States cannot easily buy weapons. Again, like China and Russia and other countries that Israel can buy directly or clandestine, or through clandestine means, or just indirectly through third parties. And then Israel reverse engineers that information and gives the intelligence that it finds to the United States, which saves the United States years of time in doing all that intelligence work and reverse engineering themselves. It also saves them billions of dollars every year in doing that, because obviously the time it takes, the engineers it takes to do all the work, very expensive and very time consuming and resource intensive. And Israel does all of that. On top of that, the United States has Israel literally live test in the field its equipment, right? So apart from the things that Israel develops jointly with the United States, like the Iron Dome or other things, the actual American products that are entirely made in America that Israel acquires and uses, they're unfortunately tested in real time in the field, because we are constantly attacked and we have to constantly defend ourselves. So we have to use the equipment. So there is no better way to test that equipment than in the field in real time. And that is an unfortunate consequence of living in a neighborhood that is constantly under threat existentially by enemies that just literally want to wipe out our entire country. So, but again, that's all part of the broader relationship, just to show you how ridiculous the claim is that Israel controls the United States, which clearly it does not, when you have the President of the United States saying literally out loud at multiple cabinet meetings and press conferences and press gaggles on Air Force One, where he said basically, I could tell Israel to attack Gaza if I want, and they would be inside Gaza in 2 minutes. That's a very clear and obvious message to indicate very clearly that it's the U.S. that orders Israel around, not the other way around. Anyway, this just goes to show that the situation is pretty much what I told you it would be, unfortunately, and that Israel is basically holding on to this ceasefire because we want to, first of all, get our 15 remaining hostages back. The bodies of, I think it's 13 or 15 bodies now that are still being held, because every day that they bring back more, they have to identify them. And so it's around, I think, 13 or 15 people that are still held in Gaza. The bodies of dead hostages, they're still held in Gaza. And that's one of the main reasons Israel continues to play along with the ceasefire deal, because we want to get the bodies of the hostages back. At the same time, by allowing Hamas to violate the deal, even by little by little, instead of going in full force and just doing what needs to be done to completely get rid of them, since they don't have any leverage over live hostages anymore, Israel is basically doing what I said would happen, right? They're allowing Hamas to test the deal and showing that Israel is maybe not, fully committed to actually getting rid of Hamas. And that is a huge problem. And I believe once all the dead hostages are returned, or as many as possible, that game will end. And if Hamas doesn't give up its weapons and surrender power, we're going to see a lot more violence. And it'll probably be pretty rapid, pretty fierce, pretty intense. Unfortunately, we'll probably see a lot of innocent people as well get harmed or killed, because that's the nature of war. And I really hope that it doesn't come to that. I hope that there's going to be peace, but let's be real, it's not likely. It's very likely that we're going to see something much uglier than that, and that we're going to see a lot of activity there that, would be frankly better if it would not happen. Yeah. So anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Talk to you later. Bye.